In my previous life, Hannah caused the death of my daughter, but my mother-in-law shifted the blame onto me. I caught my husband cheating on me with Hannah at his company. My mother-in-law tried to brainwash me, and I pretended not to see it because she promised to buy a wedding house for my younger brother. When I was about to expose them, they pushed me into the middle of the road. The van couldn't brake in time, and I died along with my unborn child. When I opened my eyes again, I went back to the day I gave birth. This time, I won't be bullied anymore. Seeing that I gave birth to a daughter, my mother-in-law's face turned green. I gave up playing mahjong just to accompany you during childbirth, but you're so useless that you didn't even give me a grandson. She shook off my hand, not caring about my life or death at all. I grabbed her sleeve, not allowing her to leave. Mom, didn't you want to find some beauty secrets for Hannah? Hannah was an 18th-tier starlet. To compete for advertising endorsements, she needed to keep her skin in good condition. My mother-in-law had been searching everywhere for beauty secrets. Hearing what I said, she looked at me in surprise. I lied to her that I saw her mother-in-law cook it for her when I attended the first birthday banquet of a classmate's child. Seeing that I told it vividly, my mother-in-law smiled so much that her crow's feet became more prominent, and she praised me again for being a good daughter-in-law who cared about the family. Wasn't I a good daughter-in-law? I had been married into the Gu family for 5 years and took care of all the household chores. Ethan said he would earn money to support me, but I didn't dare to quit my job for fear of spending too much of the Gu family's money and being looked down upon by my mother-in-law. Because of my pregnancy and waiting for childbirth, I took a long leave. Since I didn't have to go to work, my mother-in-law became a hands-off boss. She went out to play mahjong at a fixed time every day and was so busy that she didn't even have time to wash her underwear. I washed her underwear and still cooked meals as usual. How carefree she was. My mother-in-law excitedly squeezed my palm. Just then, a nurse came in. She looked at me with envious eyes. She also praised me for having a good mother-in-law. She didn't know that my mother-in-law squeezed my fingers so hard that I almost thought they would break. I shook off her hand because of the pain. My mother-in-law felt a bit guilty and smiled and painted a rosy picture for me. Mia, if you can really find a beauty secret for Hannah and she gets the endorsement, you'll also get a share of the money. My mother-in-law asked me again and again. I smiled and dealt with her. Mom, don't worry. I promise Hannah will look even more beautiful. This time, just like in my previous life, Hannah ate the beauty recipe I cooked for a week. Her complexion became ruddy, but she would occasionally have a stomachache. After she got the endorsement, she didn't give me a penny. Mia, don't you think you're just like a cash machine? Your family is like a bottomless pit. It's better to spend the money on me. This is an investment, you know. Hannah's shameless look was exactly the same as my mother-in-law's. I had already seen it in my previous life. Recently, she and my mother-in-law deliberately avoided me. But my mother-in-law was such a gossip that the neighbors all knew that Hannah had got the endorsement and the shooting time was set for 2 days later. During dinner, I stared at her watch. Hannah noticed my gaze and became complacent. Sister-in-law, this is an imported brand from the Bay Area. You probably haven't seen it before, right? She stroked the cover of the watch and pretended to take it off and let me wear it. My mother-in-law looked at me with contempt. She's just a housewife. What has she seen in the world? The scene in front of me was exactly the same as in my previous life. They also mocked me like this back then. It's really ridiculous. I just took a leave to wait for childbirth at home. I wasn't completely cut off from society. I still had some ability to appreciate things. That watch was very expensive. It couldn't be bought without 200,000 or 300,000 yuan. The remuneration for the small advertisement that Hannah took was at most enough to buy a watch. After the advertiser signed the contract with her, they paid half of the advance payment, and the rest of the money was borrowed by her online. She had always liked to overspend. This time, she would have to pay for her impulsive consumption. On her way to the shooting, Hannah's stomach started to hurt again, but she didn't care. She thought taking painkillers would make it better, but unexpectedly, she fainted from the pain. When she woke up, it was the next day, and her dream of getting the endorsement was shattered. She explained to the advertiser and wanted to reschedule the shooting time and even offered to reduce her remuneration. The advertiser blocked her and also demanded double compensation for the breach of contract. Hannah huddled in my mother-in-law's arms, feeling extremely aggrieved. I cooked some light porridge and side dishes and sent them to the hospital as required by my mother-in-law. After eating the last bite, she smacked her lips and muttered to herself. She couldn't figure out that in order to prepare for the shooting these days, she had even given up eating meat, but the test report showed food poisoning. The doctor asked about her recent diet, and they blushed and stammered, not daring to look up. Mia, you didn't do something to it on purpose, did you? My mother-in-law, as if thinking of something, asked me suspiciously. She spoke very vaguely for fear that others would hear. I also put on a pitiful look like Hannah's. Mom, I sincerely hoped that Hannah could get the endorsement. How could you think of me like that? Since my mother-in-law didn't see anything unusual on my face, she didn't suspect me anymore. I turned my back to them to pack up the food containers, with the corners of my mouth turning up. My mother-in-law had always been careless, and Hannah was eager for quick success. They would never have dreamed that the so-called beauty secret was just pork and chrysanthemum. These two things were incompatible with each other in the first place, not to mention that the pork was expired. I chopped the pork into very small pieces and added a lot of ginger, scallions, and chili peppers, so the taste was quite strong. My mother-in-law and Hannah didn't like pork, so they couldn't tell the difference for a while. During my confinement period, my mother-in-law and Hannah were rarely so attentive to me. My mother-in-law took the initiative to pick up food for me, and Hannah served me rice and soup, asking me to have more. Knowing that they had something to ask of me, I ate with peace of mind. Hannah's eyes wandered between me and my mother-in-law, looking a bit embarrassed. Sister-in-law, I've been staying up late to film recently, and I look so haggard. I heard that human milk is very nutritious. Her eyes were so blatant that when she stared at me, I felt a chill in my heart. I had just given birth to Candy, and my body was in a very weak state. I'm already suffering from malnutrition, and yet she still wants to drink my breast milk? Seeing that I remained silent, Hannah smacked her lips, looking very unhappy. My mother-in-law pretended to comfort me a few words and then discussed with me. Mia, your breast milk is limited, and Mom won't force you. You give half of it to Hannah every day and the other half to Candy. I'll buy you some high-quality milk powder. You can mix the breast milk with the powder and feed it to Candy. The nutrition will only increase and won't decrease. Only increase and not decrease? Then why is your precious daughter still eyeing my breast milk? Seeing that I frowned, Hannah had to lower her request and asked me to give her just a small cup every day. I put down my chopsticks and forced a smile. Mom, do you think I'm a cow that can be milked every day? Women during the lactation period don't have breast milk every day. Seeing that I wouldn't budge, Hannah left the table after eating a few hasty bites. Ethan had a gloomy face. Isn't it just a little breast milk? Do you have to be so fussy about it? Yeah, isn't it just a little breast milk? Then squeeze your own milk. Ethan was both ashamed and angry. He threw down his chopsticks and went to comfort Hannah. In the evening, Ethan didn't come back as he was working overtime. I hugged Candy and went to sleep. In a daze, I saw a figure. She tiptoed over and took half a bottle of breast milk on the table. Hannah, that was specially left for you by me. The next day, Hannah's face was covered with little red dots. She kept scratching and there was a big swollen patch. My mother-in-law was applying ointment to her. I took the cotton swab from my mother-in-law's hand and pretended to be concerned and asked her what was wrong with her face. She wanted to say something but still guiltily turned her head away. Hannah would never have thought that I had added honey to the breast milk. She was allergic to honey. In my previous life, during my confinement period, Hannah also had her eye on my breast milk. The breast milk I squeezed out in a day was barely enough for Candy to drink. Candy liked to bite. I squeezed the milk into bottles for her to drink. Hannah was given a cupful every day, but she was still not satisfied and even stole Candy's breast milk to drink. Candy didn't have enough to drink, cried in the middle of the night, kicked off the quilt, and then had a fever. Later, the fever wouldn't go down and she left me. I accused my sister-in-law of being a murderer, but my mother-in-law shielded her. Ethan ignored me and even slept in a separate room from me. They, in turn, accused me of not knowing how to take care of children, of killing Candy, and asked me to reflect on myself. In this new life, I took meticulous care of Candy. I thought that this time, Candy could safely get through this disaster, but unexpectedly, she still had a fever. When she was sent to the hospital, her whole body was convulsing, and her little hands and feet were ice cold. I held her in my arms and called her name. I prayed to God not to be so cruel. I couldn't lose her for a second time. Fortunately, after getting an injection to reduce the fever, Candy's complexion returned to normal. But I still stayed by her side day and night, fearing that something bad might happen to her. Doctor, how could my daughter have a fever when she was fine before? Even through the mask, I could sense the doctor's indifference. You mothers, no matter how much you want to save money, you shouldn't be harsh on your children. I was a bit confused. The doctor explained that the breast milk Candy had drunk these days was mixed with inferior milk powder, which led to her having an upset stomach and lack of sleep. It turned out that Candy's crying at night these days wasn't because of hunger but was still related to the breast milk. I remembered the guilty look in Hannah's eyes when she looked at me in the morning. It wasn't the first time she had sneaked into my room to steal the baby bottle. Afraid that I would find out, she added milk powder to it. I just didn't expect that she didn't even have basic common sense and bought inferior milk powder. In my previous life, I was immersed in the pain of losing Candy and didn't react in time. This time, I'll settle all the old and new scores clearly. I was busy taking care of Candy, so I left all the household chores to my mother-in-law. She got impatient and came to the hospital. Isn't it just some milk powder? Other children can drink it. She gets a fever after drinking it. I don't know who she takes after. What a fussy thing. I felt a chill in my heart. So it was my mother-in-law's idea to mix the milk powder. Candy had never been liked by my mother-in-law. When I was pregnant, I liked spicy food and had a big round belly. My mother-in-law kept saying that it must be a boy. Seeing that I gave birth to a girl, my mother-in-law's face changed faster than turning the pages of a book. Candy was lively, cute, and very smart. She could sense that her grandmother didn't like her, so she usually tried not to go near her grandmother. Seeing my mother-in-law blaming me, she probably wanted to help me and started crying. Her loud cry drowned out my mother-in-law's hoarse voice. Why are you crying? You good for nothing. You're so noisy at such a young age. You'll be impossible when you grow up. My mother-in-law directed her angry words at Candy. You don't like Candy, that's fine. But you don't have the right to blame her. She's my daughter. Perhaps it was the first time she saw me being so assertive, and my mother-in-law was stunned. Candy had just been discharged from the hospital. I wanted to take her home to have a good sleep. I ignored my mother-in-law and went to handle the discharge procedures. My mother-in-law came to her senses and followed behind, chattering nonstop. Mia, have you become too big for your boots? How dare you talk back to me? My son wouldn't even dare to talk to me like that. Candy, who had just been coaxed, started crying again. This made my mother-in-law so upset that she forgot what she was going to say after saying one sentence. She raised her hand to hit Candy. I hugged Candy and dodged in time. My mother-in-law lost her balance and fell to the ground. Seeing that there were people watching, my mother-in-law, being a drama queen, simply sat on the ground and played the victim. I'm just an old woman. All I hoped for was to hold my big, fat grandson. Am I wrong? My daughter-in-law said I was being unreasonable and even told my granddaughter not to recognize me as her grandmother. There's no justice. People were pointing at me. The crow's feet at the corners of my mother-in-law's eyes were filled with smugness. In my previous life, she was also such a rascal and liked to distort the facts. As more and more people gathered around to watch, I raised my voice and told everything about how Hannah came to me for beauty remedies. When I got excited, I had a mocking smile on my face. Have you ever seen anyone drink human milk to get nutrition? I also brought up the matter of Hannah stealing breast milk and adding inferior milk powder for fear of being discovered by me. I also saw my mother-in-law secretly taste something in the kitchen, and the smacking sound she made was really unpleasant. This time, the voices that had been blaming me turned to blame my mother-in-law for being disrespectful at her age. My mother-in-law stammered out an excuse. "Mom, you're not the only one who can act. I can do it too." My mother-in-law was so angry that her face turned green. She kept muttering all the way about asking Ethan to divorce me. "Okay. Ask Ethan to bring the divorce agreement to me. Remember to divide the marital property properly. I won't sign it if there's even 1 penny less." My mother-in-law completely shut up, as if she didn't recognize me anymore. Since I've been reincarnated, it's not a good idea to always play dumb and endure humiliation. It's time to take the initiative. That day, I specifically took a day off. I went to Ethan's company. It was exactly 12 o'clock. The receptionist wasn't there, so I took the elevator directly to the 9th floor. The door of the office was locked from the inside. The music was passionate, giving off a somewhat decadent atmosphere. A cold smile curved my lips. I called my reporter friends at the door and asked them to come up in 1 minute. 2 figures intertwined in an affair were faintly reflected on the glass door. I didn't knock on the door until I saw them fall on the sofa. The people inside were so lost in the moment that they seemed not to hear the knock. I pounded on the door as hard as I did in my previous life. The people inside stopped what they were doing. There were the sounds of them rustling as they put on their clothes and the woman's low muttering. "Who is it? What a buzzkill." We finally got a chance when everyone else was away. Seeing me, Ethan's expression was unfathomable. The tie around his neck was askew, and there was lipstick in a shade of dark red on his mouth. Hannah was sitting on the sofa, slowly adjusting the position of her skirt, looking at me leisurely. In my previous life, I learned from my mother-in-law that Ethan hadn't had a proper lunch in order to win over a client, so I carefully prepared lunch and rushed to his company at lunchtime. The receptionist wasn't there, so I had to take the elevator by myself. Then I saw the scene of Ethan pressing Hannah beneath him. Both of them were disheveled, just one step away from going all the way. Back then, Hannah was also like this, more annoyed than panicked. She blamed me for showing up at the wrong time. "What are you doing here? Get out. This isn't a place for you." After Ethan came to his senses, he put on a straight face to hide the panic in his eyes. Even after living this life again, I still couldn't understand how the person who cheated first could be so self-righteous. In my previous life, I caught Ethan and Hannah having an affair at the company. He pulled me to explain that Hannah had accidentally fallen into his arms. Looking at the hickey on his lips, I lost my temper and hit him randomly. Hannah stepped forward to push me away. She never did any work and was so delicate. I pushed her down, and the heel of her high heel broke. She started crying pitifully. Ethan was so angry that his eyes turned red, and he slapped me. Since we got married, we had always treated each other with respect. "Ethan, just you wait. I'm going to expose your scandal." I left after saying harsh words. While waiting for a taxi, Ethan and Hannah chased after me. He begged me not to expose this matter and promised that he would mend his ways in the future. But I refused no matter what he said. Hannah and Ethan exchanged a look and tacitly pushed me into the middle of the road. The van couldn't brake in time, and I died along with my unborn child. Ethan didn't know that I was pregnant again. I went to his company to tell him this good news. When my reporter friends burst into the office, their cameras clicked and took pictures of this scene. I took the opportunity to slip away. When the news headline came out, the stock of Ethan's small company dropped sharply, and economic pressures came one after another. He was so busy that he was in a terrible mess. My mother-in-law wanted to cover up for her son and finally became generous for once. She wanted to use money to shut me up. "As long as you pretend that you didn't see anything, I can buy a house for your younger brother right now." I remained unmoved. She put away the fake smile on her face and also said that I shouldn't regret it. Soon, I understood the meaning of her words. A few days later, Ethan held a press conference at the company. Most of the journalists who came had received hush money. The topics they interviewed were rather insignificant and deliberately emphasized Hannah's identity as an adopted daughter. Ethan's answers were flawless. Although he and Hannah kept a certain distance, their eyes were full of affection when they looked at each other. When I showed up, a group of journalists sharply criticized Ethan. He could hire journalists, and so could I. Ethan's face turned pale, and his lips were tightly pursed. Seeing me, he seemed to see his savior and expected me to help him save the situation and clarify their relationship. The front row was filled with famous journalists who wanted to hear valuable news from me. I didn't say a word but played a video on the big screen. In the video, Ethan put his arm around Hannah and entered a hotel. There were several angles, including the front and the side, and their actions were extremely intimate. Since I was reincarnated, I had been keeping an eye on the whereabouts of Ethan and Hannah. The journalists took pictures like crazy, but no one came to ask me questions. Those were the people bought off by Ethan, so of course they didn't dare to ask randomly. However, since I had already presented all the evidence, it didn't matter whether they asked or not. Ethan nervously tugged at his tie, which was a subconscious action when he was nervous. Of course, he refused to admit that the video was real. He claimed that the video was synthesized. Just when the matter was about to come to an end, my mother-in-law actually brought my parents here. My mother pointed at me and scolded me harshly. "How could I have given birth to a daughter like you? Yes, you should never have given birth to me in the first place." This was the first time I had a direct quarrel with her. At first, the person I wanted to marry was my first love. We had been together from college until graduation. After starting to work, we began to live together, and our relationship developed steadily. I brought him home, but my parents were snobbish and were determined to make me break up with him. I refused. My mother bought pesticide and threatened to commit suicide to force me. She had already found a good match for me, and that was Ethan. I refused to marry him and threatened her with suicide in return. My mother used my younger brother to morally blackmail me. When I was a child, I took my younger brother to catch loach in the field ditch. I was so focused on playing by myself that I didn't keep an eye on him. As a result, he fell down and hurt his head. My parents hated me deeply for that. They shifted the blame onto me and asked me to take responsibility for my younger brother's life. My younger brother grew up in a muddled state, couldn't find a job, and was still living off his parents at the age of over 20. My parents asked me to marry into the Gu family just to use the betrothal money to buy a house for my younger brother and help him get married. Unexpectedly, my younger brother's illness relapsed, and all that money was spent. Since I got married into the Gu family, they had been asking me for money frequently. Seeing them standing in line with my mother-in-law, I suddenly felt very calm inside. My burden for my younger brother disappeared. All the burdens had been paid off in my previous life. "Mom and Dad, don't you just want to cut off ties with me? Okay, I'll help you. Starting from today, I'm no longer your daughter. I'll apply to the court for an agreement to sever our relationship." After the press conference, netizens obviously took my side. However, some haters still stubbornly believed that the video was fake. I knew those were the trolls hired by Ethan. Now his company was in a precarious situation. As long as I added more fuel to the fire, it would completely collapse. After this incident, my mother-in-law was so afraid of offending me that she dared not to say anything even when she was angry. Even funnier was that Ethan began to show affection with Hannah in front of me. At the dinner table, "You picked up a piece of meat for me, and I picked up a mouthful of vegetables for you." It was time to add more fuel to the fire. I deliberately showed a hurt expression. Seeing that I was unhappy, my mother-in-law became energetic. "Originally, you could have lived a harmonious life with Ethan. You had to make trouble for yourself. It was you who exposed their relationship. Now you can't blame others." I buried my head in the bowl, chewed the food, and didn't say a word. Hannah thought I was jealous and became even more energetic. Smack. She kissed Ethan on the face. "Sister-in-law, since you don't know how to cherish my brother, he will be mine from now on." I pinched my thigh hard, and almost burst into tears. You two are going too far." I threw my chopsticks heavily onto the ground. "Sister-in-law, you made such a scene at the press conference. Didn't you just want to help me and my brother? I can't let you down." Hannah held Ethan's arm and leaned her head on his shoulder. "You two scoundrels, aren't you disgusting? I was so angry that I overturned the table. Seeing that I was angry, they became even more energetic and even wanted to stage a kissing show for me. I forced myself to endure the discomfort, but for the sake of the following plan, I still pretended to be aggrieved and ran out of the door. Since then, Ethan and Hannah became even more brazen in showing their affection at home. That day, when I got off work and walked into the community, I saw the video transmitted by the pinhole camera. My fingers were shaking with excitement. Finally, the day I had been waiting for had arrived. In my previous life, my child and I died so miserably. Now that I had a second chance at life, there was no way I would let them off easily. After finishing my confinement period, I returned to the workplace full of energy and worked my way up from a sales supervisor to a manager. Over the past year, I had also accumulated some savings and finally had the confidence to file for divorce. Ethan was a bit panicked, and my mother-in-law was also incredulous. Mia, have you thought it through? Do you really want to divorce me? Ethan held the divorce agreement, his fingers turning white. Why, are you reluctant to part with me? I deliberately taunted him. After hesitating for a while, he asked me, Mia, you must have hooked up with a rich man, right? Otherwise, how dare you divorce me? In my previous life, I was so annoyed by my mother-in-law, who was always causing trouble, that I also mentioned divorce. But Ethan was certain that I didn't dare to go through with it. He analyzed it with me that if I really divorced him, I might not be able to find a man as good as him. Indeed, after being married to him for many years, he often secretly gave me money to subsidize my parents' family without my mother-in-law's knowledge. It was also because of this that he had me in his control and I worked wholeheartedly as a free nanny for the Gu family. Divorce is okay, but I want the custody of Candy. Ethan had a smug smile on his face. I clenched my fists, and my fingernails dug into my palms. He didn't necessarily love Candy that much. He just didn't want to make things easy for me. After all, Candy was my life. Because of the issue of Candy's custody, Ethan refused to sign for a long time. He tore up several divorce agreements in front of me and even hid Candy away privately. I could only appeal to the court. Mia, how much is your monthly salary? Do you think the court will award Candy's custody to you? On the day of the court hearing, I met Ethan, and he looked confident that he would win. Candy wanted to come and hug me, but Ethan held her tightly. Candy, don't call her mom. From now on, you only have a dad. Ethan, you're so shameless. I watched him hold Candy and then picked up my phone and uploaded a video online. Just as the judge was about to make a final decision, the assistant suddenly whispered something to the judge. It turned out that a high-definition video had appeared on the internet. In the video, the door was closed, and Ethan and Hannah were passionately kissing each other. I had arranged this scene. I had installed a pinhole camera in the room long ago. That day, I got up very early and deliberately made breakfast for the whole family, adding some aphrodisiacs to it. Ethan and Hannah were completely unaware of all this. A few minutes after the video was uploaded to the internet, it quickly occupied the top of the hot search list. The storm that Ethan had just calmed down was stirred up again. Clients came to terminate their contracts with him one after another, and the company's capital chain was instantly broken. Originally, Candy's custody was going to be awarded to Ethan, but he was too busy dealing with the negative news. Moreover, in the courtroom, Candy and I showed a deep mother-daughter bond, which moved everyone to tears. Only then did the judge award Candy's custody to me. I was afraid that Ethan would keep pestering me, so I accepted the company's offer to work as a manager in a branch office. After divorcing Ethan, I also got 300,000 yuan in the division of property. Coupled with my stable salary, it was more than enough to support Candy. Candy was very obedient to me. She went to school and came back home obediently every day. During my free time after work, I learned from online tutorials and made pumpkin pies for her. Candy had her mouth full and said, "Mom is so great. Mom should always make pumpkin pies for Candy to eat." Candy, do you miss Dad? I asked seemingly casually. Candy sensed what I was thinking and put her arms around my neck. Candy doesn't like Dad. Candy only needs Mom. The innocent smile of my little sweetheart melted my heart. I thought I could live with Candy like this, but unexpectedly, Ethan still came to find me. On Valentine's Day, he blocked the entrance of my company. I hadn't seen him for half a year, and he had changed a lot. He looked haggard, with heavy eye bags as if they had been smoked, and one of his legs was broken. He was holding a bouquet of roses and limped towards me. Mia, I was wrong. Please get back together with me. No matter how I told him to get up, he refused to do so, as stubborn as if he was acting. I'm a person who values a sense of ceremony, especially on Valentine's Day. In my previous life, I wanted him to buy me a bouquet of flowers, but he said that I had watched too many soap operas and was being too fussy. I bought roses by myself, and Hannah wanted to snatch them from me. When I refused to give them to her, Ethan crushed the flowers under his feet in front of me. Now, he was kneeling in front of me with 99 roses in his hands. The bright and beautiful flowers were really nice, and I took them. Ethan's face lit up with joy. Mia, I even remembered our past life. I knew you remembered it? That's good. I threw the bouquet of flowers onto the ground and crushed the flower buds with my high heels. These flowers are really nice, but I don't like them. When I got into the car, Ethan was still standing there in a daze, not knowing what he was thinking. Through the rearview mirror, I saw his ferocious expression. After Ethan showed up, I felt a bit uneasy in my heart. On Women's Day, my mother-in-law came to find me again. What are you doing here? My mother-in-law stood at the door, her face full of guilt. Mia, I'm here to apologize to you. It was all my fault before. Ethan really loves you. Please remarry him. I've already asked Hannah to move out. I could see some sincerity on her face, but I didn't want to have anything more to do with the Gu family, so I resolutely told her to leave. My mother-in-law refused to leave, saying that she had brought toys for Candy and also wanted to see the place where Candy and I lived. I knew it wasn't that simple. Just as I was about to close the door, my mother-in-law sat down on the ground. It was the time when people got off work, and the neighbors around came over to watch the fun. My unfilial daughter-in-law. She has fallen for another man and wants to divorce my son. I, an old woman, have come to beg at her door, but she's still so heartless. The familiar trick, not at all unexpected. I ignored her, closed the door, and was about to go to the kindergarten to pick up Candy. Just then, the kindergarten teacher called. Are you Candy's mother? Candy. She's gone. The teacher suspected that Candy had been kidnapped. An hour ago, Candy suddenly said she wanted to go out to buy something, and she never came back after that. A child in the kindergarten saw that Candy was buying flowers by the roadside and then a woman dragged her away. Hannah's face popped into my mind. Besides her, I couldn't think of anyone else. When I came to my senses, my mother-in-law had disappeared. I realized it belatedly. My mother-in-law first came to show weakness to me to hold me back so that Hannah would have a chance to take Candy away. Thinking about Ethan coming to my company some time ago, just then, he called me. Mia, my mom and sister took Candy away. His tone was gasping, and indeed he didn't seem to be in cahoots with them. After I met Ethan, he handed me Hannah's phone. Hearing Candy's cries, I managed to calm myself down so that the phone didn't slip from my palm. Hannah, don't hurt Candy. What on earth do you want? 200,000 yuan. Transfer 200,000 yuan to my card, and I'll let your daughter go. Mia, you've ruined me. If you dare to call the police, I'll make your daughter pay with her life. Not long after I divorced Ethan, his company went bankrupt, and Hannah's acting career was also affected. No directors were looking for her to act in plays, so she could only accept the unspoken rules. She had originally wanted to trick someone, but unexpectedly, that director was cautious and secretly took some indecent videos of her. Hannah was afraid of being exposed, so she could only accept being blackmailed for 200,000 yuan. She had originally planned to steal my mother-in-law's money, but all my mother-in-law's savings had been cheated by an old man she met online and used for investment. Ethan took me to a dilapidated military factory. Candy was tied up with a rope, with tape on her mouth, and she was clutching a rose with only a few petals left in her hand. She knew it was Women's Day today and bought the flowers to give to me. Looking at her bright eyes filled with fear but still stubbornly holding back her tears, my heart ached even more. Hannah stood behind, with a smug smile on her face. Mia, I've already told you on the phone. 200,000 yuan, not a penny less. Candy shook her head, signaling me to leave. The more she didn't cry or make a fuss, the more guilty I felt. At such a young age, she was already so sensible. I walked over unconsciously. My mother-in-law showed the knife in her hand and threatened me not to go over. I can give you the money, but you have to promise that Candy will be safe and sound. In front of them, I transferred 50,000 yuan to Hannah's bank card. Untie Candy first, and then I'll transfer the rest to you. After the rope on Candy was loosened, I transferred another 50,000 yuan. For the remaining 100,000 yuan, I asked her to hand Candy over to me before I transferred it. Hannah seemed to agree on the surface, but she was full of vigilance and didn't look like she was going to let Candy go. At my signal, Ethan spoke up. Hannah, no matter what, Candy is my daughter. For my sake, please don't hurt her, okay? Hannah looked infatuated. Brother, it's this woman who made you go bankrupt. Don't you hate her? Taking advantage of her inattention, Ethan snatched Candy away. I reached out to hold Candy, but suddenly Ethan took out a dagger from his arms and put it against Candy's neck. Yes, I hate her. How could I not hate her? Ethan looked at me, his eyes gloomy. I want 500,000 yuan. I can give it to you, but you have to promise me one condition. I wasn't surprised that Ethan would turn against me. Since he came to my company, I had started to keep an eye on him. You slap them for me until I'm satisfied. At first, Ethan was a bit hesitant. But when he saw that I had transferred money to his card, his two hands started slapping those two faces one after another. Seeing their faces swollen like steamed buns, I was satisfied and told him to stop. After taking Candy from Ethan, I transferred another 200,000 yuan to him. Before leaving, I whispered something in Ethan's ear. Instantly, his face twisted. He rushed to grab Hannah's phone. My mother-in-law stood in front of Hannah. How could two weak women be a match for a man? Seeing that her phone was taken away and the money she was about to get was about to fly away, Hannah opened her mouth and bit Ethan's neck. Seeing that the phone was snatched back, Ethan was so anxious that he raised the knife and stabbed it into Hannah's abdomen. My mother-in-law, who was trying to push Hannah away, was also accidentally injured by the knife. I held Candy in my arms and watched leisurely. Candy asked me with a calm face, Mom, they seem like dogs fighting. Weren't they just like dogs? It was just a case of dog eat dog. Ethan killed someone and became a wanted criminal. He went into hiding. Before he could receive the news that the remaining balance had been transferred to his account, he was found by the police and thrown into prison. As for my mother-in-law and Hannah, one was paralyzed and the other became a vegetable, and they would never be able to leave their beds for the rest of their lives. My mother-in-law kept clamoring to see me and harassed me by making phone calls every day. I went to see her. When she saw me, she asked unwillingly, What did you tell Ethan? Why did he attack us? I leaned against the door, looking calm. I told him that I could only transfer 300,000 yuan for now. I transferred 200,000 yuan to him and 100,000 yuan to Hannah. He could snatch the money back and make up the amount to pay off his debts. After Ethan's company went bankrupt, he borrowed money from the bank again and again to open a studio. His reputation was ruined and he couldn't find any clients to cooperate with. The old clients even ran away when they saw him. In less than 3 months, the studio was closed. Ethan was chased by creditors to pay back the money. His leg was even broken, and he could only mortgage his house. Now, he was just like a stray dog, with no morality at all. There's one thing I forgot to tell you. That 300,000 yuan was the money I got from the divorce with Ethan, and the police have already helped me get it back. Mia, you? Under my provocation, the last bit of color on my mother-in-law's face faded away, and her mouth was crooked to one side. I took Candy and left the hospital. Candy asked me curiously, Mom, why is Grandma's mouth crooked? Why was it crooked? She had a stroke. Finally, this gossipy mouth of hers could be quiet. The end.